Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, mystery seekers, musers, conspiracy theorists, interdimensional philosophers, seekers of truth, and last but certainly not least, all of you with confirmation bias. You will find what you're looking for. It's inevitable. You're listening to Musings on Mysteries in the Mythical Matrix, a family-friendly podcast where we logically speculate on life. The only trigger warning for this episode is a logical conversation, so if applying the Socratic method on fringe topics is disturbing to you, please turn off the podcast now. So this is going to be a special episode here because this is our first episode with Mr. Trace Ritchie in person instead of over audio call on the computer. So Trace, why don't you say hi so everyone can hear your voice actually sounding good?
It's weird to make direct eye contact with you.
I know. I can just stare at you the whole time and make you feel uncomfortable. You know?
It's very uncomfortable, yeah. But I also very much appreciate that I don't have to sit quietly and I can actually raise my hand to interject if I want to or something.
Yeah, and I figured out the mic system a lot better, so we've actually got little, I don't know what these call,
they're pop filters.
Thank you, Mr. Audio Nerd. Yes, little pop filters, the little
foam.
Yeah, little foam
covers.
Dude, I can't think today. Thank you so much. This is really helpful. But yeah, little foam filters, so there won't be as much wind backlash when I'm breathing. So that should be minimally picked up by the mic now. And I actually figured out that I've got directional mics, so we can talk. I don't have to play Jenga on the side with my mixer, trying to figure out turning you up, turning me off, turning you back on. We can just have a conversation and relax.
Yeah, the audio prep for this was a lot easier than going back and forth for half an hour trying to figure out, okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, you're a little quiet. How about this? Does this work?
It took us about maybe 10 minutes, and half of that was us talking about the fish fact and then the creature fact that Trace conveniently forgot about. But anyway, this is probably getting a little bit boring for our listeners here. So I will say, hey, if you're listening on Spotify or any other podcasting platform, please leave us a rating. That definitely helps us gain a little bit of traction here as we're trying to do this podcast. And if you're on YouTube, give us a like, give us a subscribe, and then turn on that notification bell as well. All of that helps us continue to generate quality content for you guys and gals and everyone else out there, because it's a multitude of listeners that are probably listening on the earth, above the earth, and below the earth. Right, Trace?
I hope so.
Yeah. And so I got Trace sitting here. He's got a Sea Isle City, New Jersey hat on. It looks like a fisher hat kind of thing, a fisherman's kind of hat.
I got this hat specifically because it just looks like something I would wear out on a boat.
Yeah. We got the video going here. I don't know how much of this I'll upload onto social media and everything, but I will say Trace definitely looks like a fish nerd and a hippie, kind of all blended into one right now.
If it helps as well, I'm wearing my shark socks and also the beach shorts I got while I was at the beach. So
I could wear my toe shoes for the next episode. So for those of you out there that obviously none of you would have the background on this, but Trace, I have the toe shoes, the finger toe shoes, and Trace abhors the idea. It gives him the cringe, to put it in the Gen Alpha terms.
Yeah.
But anyway, Trace, I think you owe us a fish fact. So what do you got for us today?
So I have some qualms because right now we're recording this. It's during Shark Week.
Oh.
Yeah. So I think you're familiar with my issues of Shark Week. So it's just a general argument of sharks are not bloodthirsty monsters. I despise Shark Week is one of the precursors that got me into marine biology, and to see where they're at now is disappointing. And that's pretty much all I want to say. Although I will throw in an extra fact here. Since this is, can I say that this is the adventure episode?
This is the adventure episode. This is going to be titled Explorations, and then a whole bunch of other words that our listeners are aware of, but it'll make sense as we talk about it here.
Yes, so I was also on a recent adventure to Sea Isle City, where I got my hat.
I tried to get him to do an episode talking about it, and he declined.
I didn't feel like it fit. It's not very mystery or musings, but I will talk about the one cool thing I did, which I saved a couple horseshoe crabs because it's mating season right now. So there were a ton of horseshoe crabs out along the shore. In this one particular part, and one was stuck in some rocks, and I picked them up. Do not pick them up by the tail. That is bad. That will hurt them very much. Oh, also, bonus fish fact. This horseshoe crabs swim upside down.
I feel like it's kind of almost common sense to not pick something up by the tail in the animal kingdom, but maybe that's just me having grown up around animals my whole life. But yeah, like, that just kind of seems like really disrespectful to do to any sort of animal. So yes, I would definitely agree with you there. Like, if you're handling any kind of sea creatures, like, just like think about it a little bit. Like, think about, would I enjoy this if I was this sea creature or this land animal or whatever else? And if not, then and if it's not bothering you or threatening your life, probably don't do that thing. You know?
Yeah. Well, to be fair, they do look very sturdy. So
right,
I can see
enough.
someone being like, "Oh, I'll just pick it up," because all of its legs and stuff, they are kind of scary, but they're 100% harmless. Also, I feel like I did a horseshoe crab fish fact for the last episode.
I don't think we did, because I wanted you to save that for the next couple episodes. So I'll expect one from you then, because we're going to be talking about in the next 2 episodes, as a spoiler alert for our listeners, we're going to be talking about holes in the standard model. So I'm not trying to disprove evolution. So for those of you that just got up in arms, sit back down. It's okay. I'm just trying to point out that evolution is not the fact that it is often taught as in school. And I want to present the idea and present the facts behind the idea to show that we don't really know what happened, and that one theory can be just as good as another depending on how you look at it. And a lot of times the public school system really pushes one specific agenda, and sometimes that agenda doesn't quite fit, and they ignore the holes in it just to teach stuff and to fit the curriculum. But anyway, I digress here. I don't want to get political. I don't feel like that was too political, but I'll stop myself there. We just want to. A lot of you probably went to public school system. I was homeschooled. Trace, you went to Christian schools and kind of were around a little bit. So we both come from a little bit different of a background here. But I just want to, for those of you that aren't aware and haven't studied this in depth, I want to shed a little bit of light on that subject to give a little bit more credence to the musings on the mysteries and the mythical matrix that we are going to be doing on the show. Before we move on here, I had a hilarious encounter on social media. Man, there are so many people with confirmation bias on social media, but that's really no surprise. So I did a post on TikTok a couple days ago, and this plays into our holes in the standard model method episode that we're going to be getting into. I did a post, and it says, "Did you know that the peer-reviewed method specifically discriminates against the idea of any divine origins?" Oh, man. So that in of itself is a loaded topic, and we'll talk about that on the next episode, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. We're going to explore it a bit on air, live for us, not live for you as the listeners. Just kind of flush it out a little bit and flush out what all that might mean. And especially in contrast, I'm going to nerd out here a little bit. I'm going to take a quick segue from this TikTok conversation. There was a new quantum study that was done. I'm not going to get into it too much right now, but I'm stoked about it. There was a new study done that indicates that time might actually be in 2 dimensions or more. And we will talk about that on our quantum physics episode, and for you as listeners, that'll be coming out in about 2 weeks from when you hear this episode. So, but anyway, I digress. I kind of had a little, ADHD moment there. Kind of saw some sparkles and got distracted. But so back to this. Did you know that the peer review method specifically discriminates against the idea of any divine origins? And this one individual, I will abstain his name, commented, and he said, "Good, because only, intellectual, smart people." Oh shoot, how did he word this, man? Now I'm looking like a fool. I should have scripted this out.
I think you told me intellectual. That was the word you used.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, because intellectual people don't believe in a God. There's no one, like, basically the idea of it was like that there's no one that's smart that believes in a God. That was kind of the gist of his comment. And so, oh geez, I told you not to bang the table, and I'm pulling cords here. So I responded with the comment, like, but what about people like Sir Isaac Newton that were Christian, and Heisenberg, who played a major role in the foundation of quantum physics? He was Lutheran in the World War II era. And the dude commented, quote, blah, 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 Sky Daddy. And I just responded, I'm like, dude, you're making a fantastic argument for, the atheist side being the intelligent side of the conversation right here. And of course, I'm not trying to discriminate against anyone that's listening that is an atheist. I hope you understand that there's humor there, and that was a statement directed specifically at him and not against atheists as a whole. I think that there is absolutely intelligence on both sides. Whether you have a literal 6-day creationist, I think, looking at a lot of the scientists' answers in Genesis, whether you think the organization is great or not, they do a lot of good science. They got a lot of good intellectual people. They have a lot of great scientific resources when you really start digging into everything. And on the other side of the spectrum, I look at people that adhere to the evolutionary theory and that are atheists, and some of them have some fantastic work. Some of them are so consumed with their confirmation bias, like Richard Dawkins, that they just spew out stuff that defies all logic and reason, and they commit logical fallacies while having conversations regularly. But there are lots of other people out there from that evolutionary and atheistic perspective that have good thoughts to offer. So, but yeah, I just wanted to share that tidbit with you. There's so many fun conversations I have on social media for the MQuad page. But yeah. All right. So let's transition into the meat and potatoes of this episode here. We are going to be talking about, as you saw in the title, explorations, assuming that the podcasting platform and YouTube let me have this long of a title. The title should be Explorations, Ark Encounter, and Serpent Mound. So this is a little bit of a break from our standard norm, especially finishing up our deconstruction series that we did for the last 10-ish episodes now. Yeah, it should be episode 11. So the last 10 episodes that we did, deconstructing Genesis 1 to 11. This is a nice little bit of a break, and it kind of gives us a little bit of a transition here. So I journeyed back to Pennsylvania, and on the way, I stopped at 2 locations. I stopped at Ark Encounter by Answers in Genesis in Kentucky, and I also stopped at Serpent Mound in Ohio. And for those of you not familiar with either, or especially Serpent Mound, because that's definitely less known of the two, you will hear me talk about both, but I'm going to talk about one at a time. Also, I will clarify, for our YouTube listeners, you're in for a special treat, because I'm going to pause the episode before, or like right as we're starting to talk about each topic. And I run a drone business and a videography business myself, like just as kind of like a side thing that I do because I love taking video footage. I got some video footage of both Ark Encounter and Serpent Mound, and I'm going to play both of the videos I created into the podcast. Now, for those of you listening on Spotify, iHeartRadio, any other podcasting platforms, I will apologize because I cannot do that. Obviously, since you're listening on an audio platform, I can't put a video into audio and have that make any sort of sense. So what I will do is in the show notes, you can find the YouTube links. I'll put them there. And if that doesn't work for whatever reason, you can also just look us up on YouTube, Musings on Mysteries in the Mythical Matrix. I will have the YouTube videos created specially and specifically. They will be released the exact same time that this episode is released. So you can find our page, you can find episode 11, and right around there, you're going to see Serpent Mound video and you're going to see Ark Encounter video. And I will also be taking a pause and showing Trace the video content so it's fresh in his mind because he's already seen at least the Serpent Mound. So it's fresh in his mind so we can kind of talk about what all you guys and gals are seeing and then add in my experiences. One other caveat I'll throw in here. I know this is getting wordy. I apologize. One other caveat I'm going to throw in here. I only took a video of one exhibit in the Ark Encounter. I am not going to talk about every exhibit. I'm going to hit some key highlights that are relevant, but I'm going to leave the majority of it undiscussed out of respect for them since it's a project that they put together, and I don't want to disrespect the work that they've done in creating all of their exhibits. But I will share the one video I took, and you'll see why I chose that specific video to take. And then I have a couple of videos of just the general interior of it. But I highly, highly encourage you, go check out both of these sites. Even if you totally disbelieve that there was a global flood, just go check out the Ark Encounter. I mean, if you're passing through the area, it's a great experience. It
just looks cool. Yeah,
it's from a Christian perspective. But I will talk about it on air as best I can. But I'm not going to be able to do it justice. So it's something you have to go and you have to experience for yourself to really get the full effect.
So dinosaurs in there. If that's a winning point.
Yeah, they have models of dinosaurs they created. All right, so this is a perfect transition. So let's talk about Ark Encounter first. We're gonna talk about that, and then we'll hit Serpent Mound after that. Okay. So what is Ark Encounter? So Ark Encounter is a project done by Answers in Genesis, where they took the dimensions given in the Bible and they translated it to the approximate modern dimensions, and they created an ark, life-size Noah's Ark, from the descriptions that we get in Genesis 6. Yeah, Genesis 6. So you can actually go in Kentucky. It's just like that northern part of Kentucky. You can actually go and visit Ark Encounter yourself. Now, it's not a true literal boat. It's about 3/4 of a boat, and then the back portion of it is actually like ventilation, restrooms, and everything, and there's like buildings built off of it in the back. But the whole front, the whole like top, like the 3/4 of it, the bow and stern, that's the front and back, right, Fishner? And the bow and stern.
Bow is the front, and stern is the back.
Yeah, the bow and stern and the whole one side of it are all like literally built. And then you go in, and it's like a museum. It's not, they have some exhibits of like what it would have been like for the animals to be in there, but it's more of just kind of an experience for you to tour through, to see a little bit of what that would have been like, to see whether or not that would have worked or made sense from what we know about science and what we can deduce from the math and calculations of the space that the animals needed. So it's definitely a fantastic experience. My initial impressions on it, I had been about a decade ago, maybe just under a decade ago. It was way bigger than I remembered. I scaled it down in my mind. It was probably like twice the size that I remembered it being from about a decade ago.
I feel like it's normally the opposite. It's like when you're a kid, everything seems bigger than what it was.
Yeah, I was in high school, like early college. So I'm old. Yeah, I'm old.
I guess
Get it,
so.
Get it, man. My knees crack, my back cracks. Anyway, yes. So yeah, that totally derailed me there. It was big. It was really big. I was not expecting it to be as big as it was. It was really cool to see, and you're not going to be able to grasp what I'm saying unless you actually go to the Ark Encounter. So that's definitely my huge push here, especially out of respect for them. Go check it out for yourself. I mean, again, it's from a Christian perspective, but if you're listening here, you're seeking knowledge, you're seeking truth, you're seeking from a philosophy perspective. Just go hear the other side of the argument, even if you disagree. My other impression, before we play the video here, it was crowded. It was way too crowded, and it was kind of annoying. I went first thing in the morning with my family, and it was already jam-packed, and it got even more jam-packed throughout the day. So it just got like hordes of people swarming around you constantly, and no one's a true introvert or a true extrovert. That's like a false dichotomy, and I know that from studying psychology in depth because that was part of my degree. But we all prefer either introverted or extroverted, and I definitely would be more on that introverted tendency. And so it was a little bit overloading having to be around so many people for 2 to 3 hours of an experience. So that's just something to keep in mind for your travels there. Try to plan it on an off day. So with that being said, for those of you listening on our podcasting platforms, we are going to take an ad break. For those of you listening on YouTube, you get no ad break. You just get to you get to watch this video that we're about to play of my experience at Ark Encounter. All right, ladies and gentlemen, mystery seekers and users, welcome back. For those of you listening on podcasting platforms, again, that video you missed out on is in the show notes. That's going to be the first thing that pops up in the show notes. So just pop that open, copy and paste that link, or you can look us up on YouTube, Musings on Mysteries and the Mythical Matrix, Ark Encounter. So Trace, what was your first thoughts on that video? Because you said something when you were watching that. I wanted you to say that again on air here.
Yeah, so there's like the mini model of like the interior of it. And it had a bunch of rooms. So my question was, how do they know that's how many rooms, or like, because you also sent me a picture a while ago, like when you were there, about like how many animals they had. And I was thinking, like, how do they know that it was what, like 6,000 something animals they had, like species or whatever?
Yeah, so they had a whole board. Well, let me answer your first question first here. So how do they know what the rooms were like exactly? The answer is they didn't know. I mean, we are only given the dimensions of the ark, length, width, and height, to Noah by God. So we're not given any other descriptions beyond that. So anything beyond that is creative liberties, even the appearance of the external of the ark. I got a little model of it right here that you can get at the Ark Encounter experience. I'm holding it in my hand right now. It's got a lot of aesthetics to it, but they admit, as soon as you walk in, like, hey, we designed it this way. There's no specific dimensions or appearance given to the ark, but we designed it this way after studying naval vessels and like what would be more seaworthy. This is our best guess and artistic representation of what this would have looked like. So there's no deception or anything on their part at all to say, hey, we don't know exactly how many rooms there would have been on the ark, but we can theorize based on the different types of species that we know about that there would have been approximately X amount of rooms. So in that video, you saw that one model I took a video of. The reason I took a video of it is because that showed all of the rooms, and they predicted the ark had 3 decks. Then you had the base deck, and then you had 2 other decks above that, and that the living quarters would have likely been on the top, so that they would have been near ventilation. So again, I mean, there's inferences here, but it's common sense inferences. Like, it's nothing that compromises the account. I feel like it's more honest of a evaluation and report to give than a lot of the drawings of dinosaurs that some artists will do, because some of those can be pretty off the wall sometimes.
Yeah. David Peterson, you know who you are.
I love how you can call people out by name. It's like, I just have a general idea of something, and Trace is just like, yeah, I hate you.
There's a specific guy, this is a little bit of a tangent, there's a specific guy in the paleo community that his artist depictions are just wild claims of what dinosaurs looked like, and his only evidence is a model that he himself created. Like, basically he's just saying, yeah, I'm telling myself this is what it looked like, so this is what it looked like. And it's just adding extra spines and all kinds of wacky stuff to stuff that does not need it.
Yeah, and this transitions into the next episode we're going to be doing, where holes in the standard model, where these artistic depictions that are nowhere near the facts get presented as facts oftentimes, sometimes even in scientific textbooks, that this stuff will get presented and shown as being like, oh, this is what this could have looked like. But realistically, if you actually dig into it, no, it wouldn't have looked anywhere near like that.
I feel like you're getting a little too ahead of yourself here.
Dude, I am. I'm excited for these next couple episodes, man. I'm really stoked. But no, I mean, you were already tangenting. Also, I tangented off your tangent.
Yeah,
we took a double derivative. So to put it in math terms, let's take a double integral. Bounce back here. For my math nerds out there, you'll get that. Trace is just giving me a blank stare. He's looking at me like a fish out of water.
Nice.
So I gotta throw it in there. So yeah, the ark was built to the exact specifications. So next great question that some of the listeners might have here is, how do they know what a cubit is? Because the ark dimensions are given in terms of cubits. That's the dimensions Noah receives from God. So generally the understanding is, and this is widely accepted amongst most ancient scholars, is that a cubit would be the length from like your elbow all the way to your pinky if your arm and hand is fully extended. That is the general depiction of a cubit. And in the Ark Encounter gift shop, they also, I didn't get one of these, but they actually had a cubit measurement tool that, for what they approximately think. So, there might have been variation of, a couple inches that might have added up to a couple feet or something like that for the Ark Encounter versus the real Ark. Either way, a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller. But they did the best that they could with the information they had to be consistent with the Bible and the account that Noah has given, which I highly respect. So another thing I'll interject here, we touched on this a little bit. I saw someone on social media, I forget who this was, but they posted something saying about how we don't really know the ark's external appearance. It could have just literally been like a coffin. We were only given the dimensions of the length, the height, and the width. So the model I'm holding here has a really pretty a really pretty bow and stern, and it's got a lot of artistic effort put into it. But we don't know if this is the way it is. It could have literally just been a coffin shaped. I personally doubt it, because it didn't really need to navigate the waters. It just needed to survive. And the Ark eventually, as you remember from our last episode, it landed on Mount Ararat, and life found a way from there.
I'm going to choose to believe that it had hot rod flames on it.
Okay. Yeah, I know. I kind of like spray painted that on or something. I like it. So, another great question, and I will hit the highlights here, but to get the experience, go to Ark Encounter if you really want to see all the evidence. They posed the question, would the Ark have fit all the animals? And apparently, I didn't even know this. Apparently, there's a lot of divide from a scholastic perspective on the Bible, on Genesis 6, the passage that we've been deconstructing, Genesis 7, talking about how many animals were on the Ark. Because some scholars theorize it was even up to 14 of each type of animal that was on the Ark. And so what they do in Answers in Genesis, they had like 3 boards where it maps all of this out, Trace. It was pretty cool. But they have like 3 boards where it maps it all out, and they figure out all the different space the different animals would have needed, and they propose like cages, like designs for the smaller animals, and how that would have looked, and then what the cages would have looked like for the bigger animals. And even with the most liberal estimates, they propose that there would have been plenty of room, even if there was 14 of each species, going back to the original kind of it. Something they propose as well is that you didn't need to have each variant of dog. You didn't need to have a German Shepherd. You didn't need to have a Poodle. You didn't need to have a Golden Retriever. If you went back to the canine original ancestor, you'd have all that genetic information on board the Ark. So their argument and conclusion from the math is yes. I'm not going to say more than that. If you really want to dive into that, you just got to go check it out yourself. But yeah, it was a really cool experience overall. I mean, I was sending you lots of snap videos of it as I was going through, talking about the experience. The creatures in cages look cool. You know, they had certain sections where it was like dinosaurs or deer or other things in like small cages they had constructed on the Ark. Not real, fake, all fake. And then they had like stacks of like smaller cages for like smaller critters like lizards and mice. They had all sorts of boards up that answer a lot of like frequently asked questions that would pop up that you might think of as you're walking through there. Another cool thing, they had a comparative mythology section, which is my jam and your jam, looking at the musings on Mysteries in the Mythical Matrix podcast direction and vibe is comparative mythology. It's kind of our thing. Mm-hmm. So I really enjoyed that section. I remembered that from the last time I was there. I just wasn't sure if it had changed or not. It hadn't. It's still the same. It's a very cool section, but it talks about how there's flood myths all over the world. There's flood myths in South America, they claim, in North America, in Africa, all over the Mediterranean region, moving into like the Iraq, Iran area, all the way up into Norse. They claim that Norse mythology also has a flood myth. They claim that there's Oriental cultures that have a flood myth, Australian cultures, all over the world. And they have all this mapped out, and they draw like different pictures of what the arks like would have looked like. And then they take these arks and they contrast a couple against the dimensions of Noah's Ark. And it really goes to show when you look at all these other mythology accounts how the Bible got it right, because it's the only one that has a vessel that actually would have worked. So there were some other topics in there as well as we were going through.
I do want to shoot down the Norse flood myth though.
Oh, really?
I just looked it up. It's not really a flood myth. It's just that, and this will be an episode down the road.
Definitely.
But whenever the first frost giant Ymir, whenever they killed him, they flooded the world with his blood, and that like became all the waters of the world. So like it's not a flood myth in the sense of like Gilgamesh or the biblical flood. It's just
a quick reference
that the world was flooded at one point. So it's not, I wouldn't really call that a huge flood.
Maybe a flood nod, just like, hey, this happened. Yeah. Okay, fair enough. So it's not necessarily false, it just might not be as much detail as we see in the biblical account or most other accounts.
There's no Norse Ark, although there is like a magical Norse ship. It's not an Ark.
Okay. Fair enough. Well, we'll dive into that more, and we'll examine these to see if they, as we're doing our comparative mythology, if they made a mistake, we'll find it, and I will point it out. I have no problem doing that. Heck,
I'm aware.
Yeah, I have no problem humiliating Trace. Yeah. And you likewise have no problem humiliating me with all of your dinosaur fact knowledge and showing me up. So it's all good. So I mean, yeah, as you go through, they have some other topics that they'll talk about in the Ark as well, the other exhibits. They talk about Christianity, of course. So if that's something that you feel like has been jammed down your throat a lot as you've gone around life, that's something to definitely just be aware of and understand that they're coming from that Christian perspective, and you're going to see things from the Christian perspective and the Christian idea. And they also talk about creation. They kind of lay out the whole creation, 6 days of creation. They lay out the reasons for the flood, and they have some interesting exhibits and models about that. They even propose some climate change ideas, which I thought was interesting. They have some thoughts to interject about climate change. So, it's an experience of the Ark, and it's learning about the Ark, but it's also learning about a lot of other stuff in the museum as well. And they even have a sub-exhibit in there from the Museum of the Bible. So you get a wide exposure to the first 11 chapters of Genesis, which is what we've been deconstructing. And then you also get an exposure to just kind of some more broad topics. So take that as you will. I was kind of, I didn't remember all of that stuff going through from the first time. So take that as you will and bear that in mind, as you're planning your visit. So again, is it worth the visit? I'd say yes. I think that if you are interested in the podcast that we've been doing, you're interested in the comparative mythology story, I think it's definitely worth checking out. Trace hasn't been yet. I'm going to make him go at some point. Drag him by his shirt collar or something. I don't know. Anything you want to interject there?
It's a long way to travel there, I'll say.
It's a good 6,
well, for some
8 hours.
People,
well, yeah, for some people, yeah.
Others, it might be right down the road.
Yeah, fair enough. If you're in Kentucky, hey, you're not too far away. Well, I don't know if we have any listeners in Kentucky. I don't get those demographics on. Yeah.
Maybe someday.
Yeah, I do hope this podcast gets big someday. So maybe in a couple of years down the road. Last thing I'm going to talk about here is the Ark found. This is an interesting point to explore. So I looked up whether. Okay, let me back up. So there's a video I saw. I forget the main guy, but it was with Rick Renner. And these guys are Christian, and they were in Turkey, and they've been exploring around this one weird geographical protrusion out of the earth. And apparently it was mapped with LiDAR or something some years back, and they found that there were cavities in it. And at some recent point, they bored a hole into this geographical cavity, and they took samples out of it. And supposedly it had animal hair and like fibers from clothing and human hair, all these different things that they pulled out, which is really interesting. And so their proposal is that this is the actual Ark that's been found and that it's just been petrified. It doesn't really look much like an Ark. So I looked this up when I first saw this claim. I looked it up on the Answers in Genesis, that since they have the Ark Encounter. I'm like, do they have anything, like what do they have to say about this? And they're just like, nope, it hasn't been found. Come check out the Ark Encounter experience to see why. And I went to Ark Encounter and I saw absolutely nothing.
Really?
Absolutely nothing until I got out at the very end. And they didn't specifically address the claim, but they addressed the general idea of what would have happened to the Ark and if it still exists. And there was a board up they had after you walk out of the gift shop at the end, like when you walk out of like the little bow of the Ark.
Was that the stern?
I don't speak Italian, man. Come on.
I think you pointed at the stern in the back.
I'm not a fish nerd. You're the fish
right there.
Like I said, Trace has no problem humiliating me as we're
Bet
recording.
You don't even know what port side and starboard is, do you?
Port side is left, starboard is right.
Okay, all right. You got me there.
Take that, fish nerd.
I feel that knowledge is more of my pirate nerd knowledge, I'll say.
It's fair. I don't even know how I know that, but I just do. So it works out.
I memorize it with starboard as the right side because star is R for right and port's just the other one.
It's fair enough. I like right more than left, so starport, it has star in it, and I think stars are cool, and I like stars more than just ports, so. You're hearing a little bit of our neurodivergence here on air. Trace and I definitely do not fit the norm of psyche at certain points, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I digress here. Let's circle back around and stop tangenting. Let's take the integral back here. So they have a board at the very end of Ark Encounter, and they ask the question, will the Ark ever be found? And they propose no, because of a number of factors, and I think that they're all fair factors to consider. So apparently Mount Ararat is actually an active volcano, or it has been in recent years. And so between the lava flows, between there being at least thousands of years between the flood and now, and just between natural deterioration of wood and of shifting between the lava and the hardening of rock, and then as well the people getting out might have disassembled components of the Ark to, Noah's Shem, Ham, and Japheth were Noah's sons. Maybe their descendants started to disassemble the Ark to construct stuff because there wouldn't have been a lot of lumber.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. So you have all these factors, and they propose that, hey, the Ark probably won't ever be found because of these factors. So there's both sides of the argument there for you. I don't really know which side I'm on. I'm kind of a little bit more on, if they extracted fibers and all of these other things that seem to indicate that there's something in that cavity. All I gotta say is, dude, I want to go check out that cavity.
It could just be some cave that was used as a shelter,
but there's no opening to it now.
Could have been closed.
It could have been, yeah. And that's another fair proposal. But all of these things are just thrown around for consideration. We will never know until someone actually goes in and explores to see whether there's actually petrified wood or wood of any sort in there, or if it's just a cave, where there's really nothing. So we're going to take a short ad break here, and then we are going to, this officially brings our analysis of Genesis 1 to 11 to a close. So we will be, after this short break here, we are going to discuss Serpent Mound, and you will get to hear my take and experience on that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, mystery seekers and musers, all of you with confirmation bias, because I know there's some of you out there that are still listening to the show, and that's okay. It's okay to have a little bit of confirmation bias, but you got to look at the facts. You got to have an open mind. So we're going to approach Serpent Mound with an open mind. So first question, what is it? So Serpent Mound is an effigy mound built by the Native Americans. So an effigy mound, let me back up. An effigy mound is a mound that does not have any bodies in it, so it's not a burial site. I'm sure many of you across the states are familiar with the idea of burial mounds. This is not a burial mound. There is a burial mound near Serpent Mound, about maybe 800 feet away from Serpent Mound to the southeast, but Serpent Mound itself is not an effigy mound, or not a burial mound, excuse me. It is an effigy mound, and there are not many of these that we have records or that we have evidence of now. In fact, I think there's only one other one in Ohio besides Serpent Mound, but that's for another time. So that's what Serpent Mound is. Serpent Mound is an effigy mound that was created by the Native Americans. So I'll leave it at that for now, and I'll kind of explain a little bit more about how it was built and some of the cool things about it in a minute here. But first, I'm going to talk about my initial impressions of the site. The site is treated as a monument, so it's a sacred place to the Native Americans. So as such, with this and with Ark Encounter, I was very disappointed, but I understood why. I was not allowed to fly my drone, and that I was disappointed. I was heartbroken, but I can understand out of respect for the culture. It's a very lengthy process to get approval to do anything like that, and I'm going to try to do that maybe for a future time. But so all the footage you're going to see is from the ground for Serpent Mound, and you'll get to see that here in a second. But the site is treated as a monument. In fact, there's a quote from Ben Barnes. He's the second chief of the Shawnee tribe, and it's on a plaque there. And the effect that he says is, hey, this is built for a sacred purpose, and he even equates it to being like, hey, it's the same thing as a mosque or a cathedral or a church. To those beliefs, that's their holy ground. This is our holy ground. And that's the Native American approach here. So if you do ever go to Serpent Mound, bear that in mind, please. Be respectful of the site. You're not allowed to run around, climb on it, anything like that, you got to treat it with some reverence. So with that being said here, I will apologize to our listeners on podcasting platforms because we're going to do a short ad break. I'll only run one ad for this. And for our YouTube listeners, you'll want to check your phones or whatever you're watching on, as we're about to play a video for you here.
All right, we are back. This is my first time bringing us back. I feel kind of awkward about it, but we're here.
It is not, in fact, your first time. You brought us back when we were talking about in episode 8, the saltwater and freshwater mixing. I had you bring us back that one other time. But this is the first time you've brought us back in person. I just wanted to kind of throw you on the spot and, but yeah. So that was definitely the better of the two videos, since it's more of a public, open, not specifically created by anyone recent site. I, of course, was being respectful of the site, but I also I felt like a little bit more at liberty to get some really good footage of it in contrast to Ark Encounter, especially because of the lack of the crowd. So what was your initial impression of that video, Trace? Because I just showed it to you here just a second ago.
It was a little, still looked cool, but it wasn't as impressive as like the overhead view of it.
Yeah, definitely agree with you there, and that's where I really wanted to fly my drone. I really was hoping, and I tried really hard, but I just couldn't get permission this time around. But maybe another time. So, but yeah, that is my drone business that popped up there. Blue Jay Drone Solutions. That's me. So if you're in the Pennsylvania area, you're looking for drone work, that's the kind of content I can do. I also created that little mini map in the corner. I used the 1800s map of it that was sketched, and then I kind of put a little icon there of where I was recording from so that you as the viewer could get a better grasp. And if you didn't notice that at all, then feel free to go back and rewatch that, please, either in here or on the if you're listening on YouTube, you can just rewind it a couple seconds, or you can go find it on YouTube if you're just wanting that video itself, because that will also be available. But I just wanted to kind of give that perspective, because I was just thinking about it. I'm like, no one's going to be able to grasp this unless I can show where you're specifically looking at. So that's why I did it that way. So hopefully that's of help to you. I did the best that I could with the equipment I had, but obviously, yes, you're right. A drone would have really done it. So let's talk about how was it built. So this is pretty wild here, Trace, because you've got like carpentry background and I have some general construction knowledge. They did an impressive construction method, because the conservative estimates of it here, not talking about the political stuff, just being on the more conservative side of estimating dates, the youngest they think this is 900 years.
Okay.
So it's at least 900 years old. Could be much older. We'll talk about that in a minute. But how was it built? They laid down aggregate rocks on the bottom, and then in the general shape, and then they packed clay on top, and then they put the topsoil and everything on top of it. It's very impressive for any culture, pre our own, we can't even get our roads to last more than a couple years. And this culture that's almost a millennia before, at least, was building a monument like this out of just rocks and clay, and it's still there, and you can still see that spiral in the tail. I think that's pretty cool. You know, coming from that like civil engineering perspective, like that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
But so we know it was built that way thanks to Frederick Putnam. He excavated a portion of the mound in the 1800s, and he's the one that kind of kickstarted preserving these sites. So let's dive into who built this here a little bit, because I think that's kind of relevant. We touched on it some. So the first proposition is it's the Fort Ancient culture, and that's a classification or tribe of Native Americans around 900 AD. And I did not do a lot of research on any of these tribes here, but I'll explain why they think it was one of two cultures here in a second. So the other one, they think it could be an even more ancient culture than the Fort Ancient culture. They think it could have been built even as far back as 2,300 years ago by the Adena culture. So just let's let that sink in for a minute here. This effigy mound, from our historical perspective that is generally against dating things super old when it comes to human creation, is dating this anywhere from 900 to 2,300 years ago.
Sorry, there's a firefly buzzing around in here.
Yeah, there is. Look at that. I'll have to try to get him out of here later. I like fireflies. They're cool. Phosphorus pensphonicus. Very cool.
See, I need to start working on my scientific names.
Yeah, I'm an etymology nerd, or at least I used to be. I really like lightning bugs, and I like the Hymenoptera order of wasps, bees, and ants. I always thought those were really cool. I got into beekeeping. So
I'm a sucker for bioluminescence, so fireflies are awesome.
It's understandable.
This is a wild tangent from our episode.
As you can tell, Trace and I probably both have ADHD here, but
I definitely do.
I digress. Okay, so the reason they think it could have either been the Fort Ancient or the Adena culture that built this mound is because they recovered artifacts and remnants of dwelling sites from both cultures near the site. This is not necessarily uncommon, though, because generally you see that people will tend to pick to settle in the same areas over and over again, even despite not having known that there was anyone there before. So this is kind of a common theme that you see in history, at least from my understanding of history, is that the dwelling locations tend to be reused just because it's a convenient place either for water source or for temperature or climate or whatever reason. It's a strategic location if you need to fight off attackers, any number of things. I did touch on this already, but there is also a burial mound to the southeast. I'm not sure which culture it's the burial mound for. I'm going to guess and say it's the Fort Ancient culture, but I don't know that for sure. So another interesting fact about this here, Trace, did you do much research into Serpent Mound at all, or were you just kind of coming on and being surprised?
I was just coming on to be surprised. I mean, I've heard vague mentions of it before, but I never, dug into its significance.
So, cool fact here about this, Trace. Serpent Mound is almost in the center of a crater impact site. One of two in the United States. The other one is in Arizona. And I've also been to that one, actually.
That's like a major one, isn't it? In Arizona?
It's huge. It's massive. So the one in Arizona, you walk in and you know you're in a crater impact because it's pretty obvious. Serpent Mound, it wasn't so obvious. I actually did know that, but when I'd forgotten it, and I got to the site, and I did not remember it until I saw that on the plaque. You look around, it doesn't look anything like a meteor impact in any way, shape, or form. So, this makes sense because contrast the arid environment of Arizona, where you get relatively little rainfall. There's going to be relatively little erosion that's going to occur on a meteor impact site, versus a location in Ohio that's lush, full of vegetation, has tons of water flow. Of course, this meteor site is going to deteriorate a lot faster. So
here's a counterpoint. If the crater eroded, why hasn't Serpent Mound eroded?
The Serpent Mound is built on a little bit of a plateau within the impact site, in contrast to everything else. That one, I was expecting you to have some kind of retort, and you're just kind of
I'm
spacing
just still,
out.
I just still have to kind of think that like.
But that is interesting though, and that was my thing. Is why I thought it was so cool, is because this is at least 900 years old, and this hasn't eroded away.
Yeah, you think
cool.
you think it would have.
Right. So this ties perfectly into my next point here. This crater impact is estimated to be millions of years old, of course, coming from that evolutionary perspective, because everyone functions from that model, and they do some loose estimates and calculations by looking at different layers, and they say, oh, it has to be this age. Well, maybe not. Let's put those assumptions on hold for a minute as we progress through this conversation, and humor me here. I'm saying this more to our listeners than to you, Trace, because I know you're probably more on board with me than some of our listeners might be.
Maybe I'm not. Maybe this is all a ruse.
Maybe it is all a ruse. But hey, we're in person now, and I know Muay Thai, so I can beat you up. So it's okay.
It's true. He's done it before.
So for those of our listeners, I got a little bit of context to that. You can't just say that I'm like abusive. We've done
stabbed me in the eye with a sword before too.
So we both are heavy into, I wouldn't quite say fantasy, but like we're both a bit of medieval weapons nerds, and so we've kind of messed around with like spears. We've done like spear fighting with, like, I guess LARPing would kind of be the appropriate term for that.
Yeah, I guess so.
We've done like sword fighting with like polyester, like thick, heavy polyester swords and bow staves and all sorts of other fun stuff. So,
lightsabers.
Yes, we've also done lightsabers. I saw some epic footage on my phone, I think, from using the lightsaber in the dark that one time. But anyway, dude, we got to take the integral. We got to get back here, man. We're getting off topic. Okay. So if we set aside those ideas, what can we infer about the site? Because you can look at the dating methods. There's a lot of assumptions built into that, and we'll get into this in the next episode. But there's a lot of assumptions built in any dating method that's used about the constant rate of decay of certain components or a certain rate of erosion or whatever else. But that's not how the world works. The world often has very extreme events that can happen at certain spiked points, but the evolutionary theory generally proposes a very gradual approach. Again, we'll explore this in the next episode, but let's just keep an open mind that, I think we can all accept the fact we can't go back and test and observe when this crater actually impacted. So we'll never know for absolute certain what day, year, time the meteor impacted this site. So this transitions to the next point. Serpent Mound is astronomically aligned.
You mentioned this to me.
Yes. So for those of you that are not aware, I'll give a very brief astronomy explanation here, and you can kind of correct any points. So because of the Earth's tilt and how the Earth tilts back and forth with the season adjustments of winter and summer, if you were to map where the sunrise or sunset is at any given point, it would make an infinity symbol, but one of the loops would be bigger and one of the loops would be smaller, depending on if you're in the northern hemisphere or the southern hemisphere. And I think if you're on the equator, it's pretty close to the same.
I didn't know that part. I knew the infinity loop, but I didn't know the loops change size.
Yeah, so I mean, if you want to see pictures of this, just Google, I guess like summer solstice, like time progression or something like that.
Alaska sun through the year. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I think the moon does the same thing, actually.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know about the moon, but
maybe not. I might be talking crap there.
You might be. It wouldn't be the first time. But anyway, that's why you won't have a sunrise or a sunset from the exact same point, except for on that same day the next year. So that's important to bear in mind. Because whoever built Serpent Mound astronomically aligned Serpent Mound in multiple ways. So the mouth itself, and I have a little coaster here with the serpent on it, so I'm going to be showing Trace this here for your listeners and for you on YouTube. I'm sorry I have nothing prepared for you. So
sucks for you, I guess.
You can just Google a aerial map of Serpent Mound as I'm talking, or you can go back and re-listen to this point here. So the mouth itself is astronomically aligned to the summer solstice sunset. So Then there are 3 loops. If you're looking from the head, there are 3 loops on the right side. Those 3 loops on the right side, if you're looking the same direction as the snake, those are the ones that are 3 of those are also astronomically aligned. The first outward curve faces towards the summer solstice sunrise. So that mirrors that summer solstice sunset that we see with the mouth. The second outward curve faces the equinox sunrise. And I think the equinox is like the midpoint where the sun actually rises from the same point twice in the year. It's where that infinity loop meets. And then the third outward curve faces the winter solstice sunrise. And then supposedly, I forgot about this one as well, but supposedly from the center of the tail, if you draw a line through the head, it's supposed to roughly align with true north. So a counterpoint to this that was presented at the site is that the curves that you see are not precise. Because how can you determine a specific, let's talk in terms of compass here for a second. How can you determine a specific azimuth, a directional shooting of your compass to a 360-degree accuracy from something as broad as a curve? But I shot a portion of the video intentionally the way I shot it, where I looped around one of the curves so that you could see it. So if you want to go back and watch that, please do, so you know what I'm talking about here. But when you were watching that loop, I pointed out to you as we were watching it, you could pretty clearly see that the 2 walls of the U for that loop, they were pretty close to parallel. So if you aligned yourself dead center in that, you could pretty much shoot yourself like straight down that azimuth and get a good general direction, at least as much as you could in ancient times without having something like a modern compass. Do you have anything to add on that from the video I showed and having pointed that out to you? Do you disagree with that?
No, I wouldn't say so. But I think with anything, because I think the Earth's axis has actually changed throughout the years too.
It does.
So you also might have to account for maybe the Earth was in a different spot.
So what you're talking about is precession, and that is the gradual progression of not just the Earth, but it's like the whole movement of our solar system through the Milky Way galaxy, to the point where I think in the next several thousand years, our North Star will not be the North Star anymore. It'll be the place of the North Star will be taken by another star.
Well, yeah,
yes.
our skies are going to change, but I'm more so talking about like the actual tilt of the Earth. I think it's actually changed.
Oh, really?
I believe so.
That's interesting. I'm going to tell you to fact check that and bring that back for when we record the next episode. How's that sound?
I'm pretty confident, but
pretty confident.
I can fact check it then. You might have to remind me.
Yeah, let's fact check it. I'll text you tonight to do that while you're working on your bonus episode. We'll leave that a secret for the listeners. Trace has a bonus episode we're going to try to fit in at some point. We're going to use it as a little break from the musings on the mysteries and the mythical matrix. By the way, I meant to say this way earlier and Trace distracted me. If you want to hear about Trace's experience on his fish adventures, email us at m.quad.musings@gmail.com and just scream and say, tell Trace to tell his fish stories.
Okay. That trip is still upcoming. So
okay.
There's time.
Okay, sounds good. But yes, I'm trying to get him to do it. He doesn't feel it's relevant. So we'll leave that for the listeners to decide. How's that? Are you okay with that? I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
I mean, if I see a sea monster out there,
there you go.
I'm gonna bring it up.
Perfect. Oh yeah. I mean, I'd be very mad at you if you didn't. I think we'd have to do a sword match or something, or like fight with some spears again or something.
I'm down.
All right, fair enough. After this, let's go. I think I still have them over there. All right. So, what is this supposed to be? So I mean, obviously the name kind of infers one theory, Serpent Mound. So, surprise, some people think it's a snake.
No. Really?
So, I mean, you can certainly see that idea with the coil, with the loops. It very much looks like a snake. The head is kind of where I'm not so sold. It doesn't look so much like a snake head, and then I don't know what that is in its mouth. But some people propose it's eating an egg. Some people propose the snake is eating the sun. Serpents, and we'll get into this when we talk about Native American myth, Trace, but serpents actually play a pretty big role in Native American myth, apparently, and I didn't know this. It's like the sky serpent or something along those lines is a huge part of many Native American cultures' belief systems, and it's kind of like one of their major deities, I believe, from my loose research and what I saw at Serpent Mound.
I'm gonna have to. I've got a big Native American myth book, so I'll try and fact check that.
So supposedly as well, the serpent was supposed to actually offer its power in forms of copper and shells.
Shells?
Yeah, and this comes straight from Serpent Mound and like some of the plaques they had up talking about this Native American like mythology, I guess. I don't know if that's quite the right term, but belief system maybe, depending on...
Mythology is anything with religion. So like technically,
Bible
the stuff we're talking about is
mythology, yes,
Christian mythology.
Right,
so,
yeah. So
it would be mythology. If it has to do with religious stuff.
So technically, the term mythology doesn't mean that it's true or false. It just means that it has religious connotations. If we're wrong on that, email us at m.quad.musings@gmail.com, and I'll tell Trace how wrong he is when we get that email. But I digress.
I mean, I think I'm pretty familiar with the connotations. Legends is like maybe historical stuff, like a story around something historical.
Yeah, like King Arthur legend. It kind of gets some things added to it as you go, like a fish story. You know, when you go fishing, the fish gets bigger each time, you know, like every single time you tell it.
So yeah, then myths is anything around like a belief system, religious beliefs. And then there's like fables and fairy tales, which are just stories with no like history in them or anything. They're just stories.
I'd buy it, but I don't know if you're licensed to sell that or not. So we'll leave it at that. How's that sound?
Okay.
All right. So there's actually a second theory about Serpent Mound. And this is kind of where I lean personally, so we'll hear your thoughts on this in a second, Trace. So, the last clip I played in the Serpent Mound video, I kind of do that rising up shot. And I pointed this out to you as well, Trace. There's a little mound in front of that egg or oval shape of that the serpent supposedly has in its mouth. You just keep dropping stuff every single time. It's
was only the one... This first time. Oh, that was the first time that I dropped something today.
Today, anytime you hear a banging sound going on, like 70% of the time it's Trace just fidgeting, which is fair. You're just having to sit there while I talk, so it definitely isn't the most exciting thing. I like the sound of my own voice, but I'm just kind of a little narcissistic like that. So I'm kidding, by the way, for our listeners. I'm not actually that conceited. Okay, but so let's circle back here. So that last shot I did in the video, where I do that rising up video of Serpent Mound, you'll notice that there, in front of that oval, there's a little bit of a bump. And that is actually a triangular feature that's pointing the same direction that the snake's mouth is pointing. So if you look at this here, this is what I propose. And I'm showing Trace this in person, so I'm trying the best I can to also describe it. So you have this little triangle shape that's in front of this oval that then has this other weird-looking like tail to it that snakes around. My proposal is this being built almost smack dab in the center of the meteor site. It's a little bit, I think, southwest from the actual center, but it's on like a big plateau in the crater impact. My thought is, what if these Native Americans actually saw the meteor and saw it impact, and some years later went back and built a memorial to commemorate what they saw, and the impact looked something, or like as it was coming down, it looked something like this? Because if you do look at this here, you know, from when we play Helldivers, Trace, think about, you know, how the pods kind of had that little bit of fire on the tip. You kind of see that there, and that's not in all depictions. Hang on a second.
So your proposal is that the oval is the meteor.
Yes.
That little triangle is the re-entry fire, whatever.
Yeah, and the snake's mouth is that tail from the meteor. So like here in this depiction, you don't see that little triangle tip, but this one you do.
Yeah, and in the little map in your video, I didn't see it in there either.
Yes, they did not have it in the map, but I did capture it in the video. So thank you for pointing that out, so our listeners are aware. So that is my proposal here. To have built this on a crater impact definitely seems very coincidental. So I don't know. I look at this. Supposedly, this matches up with some more abstract Native American artwork of what snakes look like. I haven't seen those similarities in the loose research I've done. So I personally don't buy so much that this is a snake. I think sky snake is more maybe a connotation for meteor coming down and the trail that meteor leaves. But
I mean, that definitely makes sense, because if you see a meteor streaking across the sky, you could very much say, oh, sky snake.
Yeah. And I wonder too, looking at these curves, because I doubt a meteor would have done these kind of curves coming down. But what if these curves were inserted as ways of marking time or something, saying that a whole year passed that this was in the air before it came down, that we had an equinox and we had a summer solstice, sunrise and sunset, and then right after that is when it came down. I don't know. And then what does the swirl mean? Again, I don't know. But I want to start thinking about these things in different ways. That if you look at this from the standard model, it has to be a snake. Oh, it's just Native American mythology, and it kind of gets poo-pooed on as the general scientific method poo-poos on any religion or belief system, whether it's Christianity, Buddhism, anything like that.
I do have a third proposal for this.
Okay, let me finish this up here, and then we'll kick it over to you. But so yeah, I don't know what the coil would represent specifically, but I'm throwing this idea out here because I don't want to be confined by this standard model way of thinking. I want to break free of that and ask these questions because we don't know. What do you know, Trace?
This is a little wild.
Oh boy. I have no clue what he's going to say.
But hear me out. It's
okay.
Aliens. No, I don't, but I've been hearing a lot of theories that, fourth dimension kind of stuff popping in and out. Spiral could be maybe wormhole. This is wild to claim this, but it's just, thoughts. That's what we do here. So spiral's the wormhole, right? This little egg shape, it's very oval-like. A lot of UFO sightings are very oval-like, cigarette-shaped UFOs. That's a very common sighting. So it could just be UFO popping in, doing couple little zigzags. That's the little fire trail there, or like where the serpent's mouth could be, as you said.
Yeah.
And then
UFO. I love it. That's fantastic. So we're going to be talking about UFOs in a couple months here, so that's perfect.
That could also explain why it's potentially astronomically aligned too, because that's the whole pyramid thing is.
Yeah, and then you got to wonder what these astronomical alignments mean in terms of being able to maybe even access the spiritual world, or when things bleed over. You see this kind of idea presented in The Legend of Korra from the Avatars. No, but seriously. I mean, that's based off of more of a polytheistic belief system, and I think a little bit more of a Buddhistic belief system, that there's many gods in the nature.
Well,
and you see that there are certain. You see this idea, and I'm sure they got it from some kind of myth or something, but where the spiritual and the physical world start to overlap when there are astronomical alignments. So you do have to wonder.
There's a lot. I mean, we could do a whole episode about this kind of stuff.
Let's do it. Are you able to do it?
Oh, I'm able to do it.
Heck let's do it.
I've been listening to a lot of stuff, and some of it's pretty wild, but there is a lot of shaman kind of stuff, that they have these drugs, or they use whatever plants, and they go into these states where they claim to go into a different dimensional realm, and then they see these spirits, and that's kind of there is a whole fourth dimension is the spirit realm,
right?
And that's in every kind of mythology there is out there, is that there's some kind of spirit realm, astral realm, something like that a lot of these the Vikings, they had mushrooms, and I think they used nightshade as for their berserker stuff. The shamans, they have all kinds of other stuff. There's a whole theory surrounding DMT, which is it's a drug now, but it's also the most naturally occurring drug. And they also say DMT is the thing that releases in your brain when you die. So there could be connections there that that's what gives you access to the spiritual realm. And there's all, I said, we could do a whole episode on this stuff.
All right, we're gonna do an ad break here.
Okay.
We're gonna make this episode a little long because we're gonna go down this rabbit hole a little bit. Okay. I want to go down this rabbit hole. All right, so we're gonna do an ad break, and we will be right back. All right, we are back, ladies and gentlemen, mystery seekers, musers, conspiracy theorists, all of you out there. Trace is definitely in the conspiracy theorist mindset right now, but I love that.
I got a tinfoil hat on and everything.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, I love this because you're looking at it. It absolutely does look like the Tic Tac UFO that one Navy captain reported seeing, if you just look at that oval shape. And then you see everything else. And that could also depict the swirls of like the movement of it or something. You know, I thought it looked maybe a little bit like a Tic Tac, but I did not think about the that portal aspect. So thank you for bringing that up. That was a fantastic addition. Shifting gears here.
Okay.
You opened a can of worms here. We're going to dive into some fun stuff. So you were talking a lot about accessing the spiritual in a sense. So first and foremost, I'm going to say one of our guests in the future after our UFO, Bill Rudge, I'm planning to have him on, so I'll name drop him. He's a very good friend, family friend of mine and my family's. He's planning to come on and talk to us if it aligns with his schedule. He's going to talk to us a lot about the occult and connections that might have with the UFO phenomenon. So I think he's going to be able to address a lot of questions that we might come up with here. So for those of you listeners out here that are listening before that's aired in probably September, November of 2024 timeframe, if you have questions on the occult, UFO connections, send that in. We can ask those questions to the guests while we have them, and you'll help the conversation be better that way. So email those questions at m.quad.musings@gmail.com. That's m.quad.musings@gmail.com. I have not had any emails yet, and I'm eager to hear from listeners and not just trolls that are on social media platforms. So that's the first thing I'm going to say. Second thing I'm going to say is that there is definitely a lot of accounts of even Christians that have been into the New Age movement before, having had experiences with astral projection and stuff like that, and the scary things that they see, and how they've even almost had to race back to their bodies before something gets into their body. And you see potentially in the book of Enoch, it's also described that Enoch goes and kind of sees maybe the spiritual as well. So you have a lot of interesting components there where there is, I think, absolutely something beyond our reality. And I think, and that's why I'm so excited about that quantum physics study that I've been referencing about a second dimension to time, because this affirms there are dimensions to our reality we are not yet grasping that we can access, or at the very least exist. What do you got, Trace?
I was going to say the DMT studies that I mentioned before, I can't remember how many people it was done on, but it's outside of this study too, I believe, but they all kind of report similar, like seeing similar things as well.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them are even like what you could say is like the typical like alien gray stuff.
Yeah.
So there's it's a whole rabbit hole you could go down on this stuff.
We are really cracking open this can of worms, but this is perfect because this is actually the next direction. So we're finishing up, we're talking about science, and then we're going to finish up our series with Harrison Smith, Is the Bible Viable? And then the next topic we're going to tackle after that, I got a UFO guest lined up. I got Bill Rudge lined up to come on. I've got potentially another UFO guest as well to come on the show.
Yeah, we're just going crazy.
Yeah, so we're going to go crazy. We're going to talk a little bit about Mothman as well, because that Mothman festival is going to be coming up in September. So we're going to start exploring a lot of these ideas and really starting to flesh them out. But yeah, no, I love this direction that we're going here. But there's even, Trace, there's even accounts I've heard that there was someone that actually died in like a hospital or something, where he died and he left his body and they revived him, they resuscitated him, and he came back into his body, and supposedly he had like passed through like the roof of the hospital, and he was looking at the hospital from above, and he saw shoes sitting on top of the hospital. And then later on they went up and they found there was actually shoes there. So there's all sorts of wild accounts like this. And so that's where my problem is with science as it's done today, is because it's placed within these bounds of comfort. It doesn't get applied to things like this, but there's so much potential there if we accept that there's things that we don't know. Mm-hmm. And that's where I'll drop that. I think it's the Arthur C. Clarke quote where, magic is just science that we don't understand yet. And that's something I've seen a lot of people doing on social media where they're like, oh, you believe in Christianity, you're just believing in magic, or you believe in any religion, you just believe in magic. And it's like, well, magic is just science we don't understand yet.
I mean, every culture also had some, like medieval times, they had fairies and magic. Now today it's it's aliens and UFOs. And
what do you think would happen if I took my iPhone 13 Pro Max that I've got in my hand right here, and I went back 2,000 years to Jesus' day, or heck, even 3,000 years to no, we'll say let's say Cleopatra's era, 50 BC time frame, and I showed this to them, and if I somehow had service there, and I was able to call Trace and talk to him, what would they say that is?
Yeah.
It's magic. It's sorcery.
This is a little tangent. Did you know that Cleopatra is closer to the release of Friends than the building of the Great Pyramids?
I've heard that analogy in terms of modern day, but never specifically referencing Friends. That is amazing. Trace, we are going on so many tangents right now. We're basically done. This is final thoughts that we're just kind of getting out, so you don't need to apologize. We shoot off on tangents, and that's okay. Sometimes you got to take derivatives, and sometimes you got to take the derivatives of the derivatives. That's my math memory serves me right. That's how you get tangent lines. So it's been a while since I've done all my math courses in calculus, but
sure,
I'm a math nerd sometimes. My math teacher always had me bring in pies for March 14th Pi Day. Yeah. Anyway, one last thought I wanted to interject here on this whole conversation that we're having. So let's circle back to what we were talking about in terms of Tower of Babel, right? And how we had that discussion, I want to say last episode maybe, about the material they used and why it might have been asphalt and mortar, because there is that repulsion that fairies have to using metal like iron, right?
Yeah, like iron, silver, that kind of stuff.
Right. So let's take that a step further. So some of you will know the show we're talking about. Some of you will have no clue. Iron Fist. Great show. Marvel produced it. It was on Netflix. I have no clue how to get it now. So the main character, he can channel his chi and everything, which is very new agey, but he gets pronounced as insane when he comes back home to America, and he gets put in a psychiatric ward, and they give him pharmaceutical drugs that, quote from him, block his chi so he can't punch through things and channel his chi the same way he could before. And so it weakened his powers, it weakened his ability to tap into his life force and even the spiritual in a sense. So it's a really interesting idea, and I love that they opened that can of worms for me, because I would take that idea and I'd apply it to real life and be like, okay, what if the things in our food, constant surrounding by technology, constant surrounding by these 4G, 5G networks, Wi-Fi routers, all of this metal, all of the junk in our foods that's there's so many preservatives and there's so much pesticides and crap that ends up in our food. A large part of the American population is on pharmaceutical and drugs, and that's not to shame anybody. I get sometimes you need that, but that's the doctor's general go-to is, oh, hey, you have XYZ issue, here's a pill for it. What if all of these things actually block our ability to see the spiritual realm in a sense? What if it blocks that, to kind of borrow a new age term, because I don't really have a better way to put it, what if it blocks that third eye in a sense? What if we can't tap into that because of all of these environmental factors? Because you'll see a lot of religions like Christianity put emphasis on fasting as well. Jesus, when he goes out to connect with God, he goes into the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights, and he doesn't eat anything. I think he doesn't drink anything either. So I'm just going to kind of leave you with that and see what your thoughts are. I know that was really loaded, but I'm trying to draw the connections to the conversation we've had in the past. I'm trying to build off of it here.
I mean, if you're saying fasting is opening yourself up,
I'm not saying fasting is anything necessarily. I'm playing with these ideas that fasting can make you, the Christian concept is that denying your flesh can make you more susceptible to be able to hear God. And then I would propose that maybe that concept applies to our blindness to the spiritual in terms of all the junk and crap that's out there. I don't know. I'm not saying any of this is absolute in any way, shape, or form. Again, we're logically speculating here. So do you have anything you want to add on that?
I mean, I definitely think that, I don't want to say definitely, but I feel like there is some kind of energy that we have. Do you know what I mean? So I think in the past there definitely was a connection between our world and a more spiritual world, because you have all these like ancient accounts and stuff, like the shamans and all that stuff.
The Nephilim in Genesis 6, mixing of DNA. Like what the heck is that? From, looking at that from, the secular perspective, but we look at it in terms of potential interdimensional extraterrestrial contact.
Yeah. And I mean, you still see some of that today. Now, some of it's just, some crazy kooks out there, but you also have to think all these people are still more or less reporting the same thing. So it definitely begs the question of like, okay, there's something out there for that.
Cattle mutilations are another big thing too that often get overlooked, but that there are surgical cuts done, and that there is rarely, if ever, any blood on the scene whatsoever, or in the animal, that all the blood has been removed, and that the animal has had parts taken out, usually reproductive organs as well, which aligns with a lot of the supposed, and I don't want to get into too much stuff here with being family friendly on this episode, but with the supposed fixation of a lot of people that have UFO encounters of being being examined and studied scientifically, that these things start to align with certain components that are missing from these animals. So you start to see a lot of dots get connected, and you connect that idea to the Genesis 6 idea of fallen angels reproducing with human beings in genetic experimentation. And then you start to look at this potential of a spiritual realm that we've lost contact with to some degree or another, maybe because of our environment, maybe because we're just so busy even. Maybe we just don't connect with nature enough to be able to see what these other things might be like. So,
I definitely think there is a lack of connection, or at least attempt to, in some people. But then you also have people like me, for example. I want to experience this stuff because I want to see it and believe it. Right now, it's just like a Fox Mulder X-Files kind of thing of I want to believe, but I haven't seen anything, so I can't really necessarily believe it.
Yeah, and that's where you have to get careful too, especially from a Christian perspective. But even if not, looking at more of the New Age perspective, that from a Christian perspective, it's evil, demonic spirits. From a New Age perspective, there's a lot of vicious, malevolent spirits out there as well that really do mean you harm, and so. Yeah, that's what we're playing with those ideas here, but we definitely don't want to tap into that and open up either, I guess. It's kind of finding that happy medium of exploration, but safety as well. Yeah,
I want to just be an observer. I don't want to mess around with like an Ouija board or something.
Nope.
That is a big no-no for me.
Nope. But yeah, I've got a whole slew of other thoughts and instances I could talk about, messing with certain things like the tarot cards and Ouija boards and stuff, and how that can make you more susceptible to encountering evil, malevolent forces that mean you severe harm. But yes, we're really tangenting here, but I love it. This is what it's about, and it's nice now that we've kind of laid that framework of that Genesis 1 to 11 analysis. We can start looking at this stuff. We can start comparing these UFO encounters with the Genesis 6 encounters, with all of this other stuff about potential spiritual realm. And
I'm just excited to talk about all these cases and stories of like UFO stuff or Bigfoot encounters,
and how all this connects to the missing 411. That's something we're going to talk about as well.
That's another thing. It all connects.
Yeah,
in the end.
I think it does. Yeah, maybe not every time.
Well,
but I think sometimes it does.
There's definitely cases out there that's like, you definitely have to look at it and be like, okay, something's going on here. You can't just ignore everything.
Right. So for those of you listeners that aren't aware about what Missing 411 is, it was done by a detective, Dave Politis. He put together a collection of initially 411 different cases of people that went missing under very mysterious circumstances, usually in national parks. It was usually what the trend was, but it sometimes even happened in people's backyards, or even in a couple cases from people's houses.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I've been reading through his eastern East Coast, because he split it. He split the divide in the East Coast and West Coast, two main books that talk about the state encounters at least. And then he subdivides a couple other of like hunters and everything like that. But I'm reading through the eastern coastline of the United States. So just East Coast. But yeah, there was a couple accounts of like kids like just disappearing from their rooms even. which is kind of scary. But for the most part, it was people out in the wilderness that just disappear, and it doesn't make sense. And there usually was a trend of inclement weather that would come in. And then there was the trend that if this person was ever found, they were found in an area that had been repeatedly searched. And if were found alive, they didn't have memory or the ability to communicate what had happened or what they had saw or experienced. And for those that did, those are very bizarre encounters. But we are way over time here. So I just kind of want to put that little tidbit in there. So what 411 is and why we're going to talk about that. That'll be at some point. Maybe we'll do that this year after UFO. Maybe we'll do that next year for like kind of as we get near the Halloween time frame to talk about 411, because I feel like that's
spooky.
Yeah, it's a little spooky, makes you a little cautious to go out at night. But that's the thing about 411 is it's like you can't dismiss it out of hand the same way that you might have been able to do UFOs at one point, because it's missing people that go missing, and even like bloodhounds and stuff aren't able to find like scent traces of these people. Mm-hmm. So you have to look at it. Yeah, I don't know. That was kind of my selling point on the 411s. Like, you can't fake this many missing people. And then there's so many more missing cases than just 411 now. Like, he's dug back 200 years and found, I think, thousands of people that have disappeared, often under there's a couple cases I'm reading through, and I'm like, okay, but this family member seemed a little suspicious, and they were never really checked out, so maybe they could have done something. But there's a lot of other cases where you're just like, what the heck happened here?
I mean, that's with everything. There's so much evidence or cases out there that it just gives you more questions than answers.
Yes. It's like, as Albert Einstein said, as the circle of knowledge expands, so does the circumference of ignorance. Final thought is holy guacamole. So,
so stupid.
Does the guacamole then have to be blessed by a priest to be holy?
It has to be.
It has to, right? That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Email us your thoughts at m.quad.musings@gmail.com. If you think that the guac has to be blessed by a priest or not, let us know. All right, Trace, give us your creature fact, and let's shut down for the night here.
Okay. So since you were in Ohio,
oh boy,
this is what popped in my head. I was a little unprepared for this.
You just say Ohio, and I have no clue. There were so many things.
There's a lot of things.
Just the cars alone. You could do a creature fact on some of the cars.
On the cars?
On the cars. They are that scary on the roads, man. Oh. They're like falling apart. There was like a truck we saw that like had like a pickup truck that had like a bent frame, like, and everything. It was literally like bowed in the middle, like and it was driving like on a highway.
Wow. All right.
No disrespect to our Ohio listeners if there's any out there, but y'all are wild sometimes. There's some parts of Ohio that are nice, I gotta say, but there's
besides the cornfields and a couple billboards that are like 20 miles apart. Everything I hear of Ohio is just cornfields. Whoa, a building there? Crazy. And then it's just 30 more miles of cornfields.
It's better than Missouri where they have Uranus fudge. Anyway. All right, creature fact.
Okay, so I feel like you've heard about this before. The Loveland frog?
I think so. This sounds familiar, but refresh my memory.
Okay, so it's I feel like we should get into the full case of this because it's like not super credible. It's just kind of weird. But
-2 points for you not bringing on a credible experience or account. How dare you?
It's a creature. I don't know what you want from me. I
thought you were supposed to be literally first episode. I'm going to be bringing more of the scientific approach.
Well, yeah, but the creatures, some of them are going to be a little wild. But this does have somewhat of an explanation behind it.
Okay.
So 1972, I think there may have been a spotting before this, but a police officer spotted a 4-foot tall bipedal frog monster walking around, which I think the story goes that he spotted a figure. Before he could identify what it was, he just started shooting at it.
That's the definition of shoot first, ask questions later.
I guess
right
so.
There. That violates like every rule of engagement that's taught to military personnel, law enforcement personnel. Okay, anyway, continue.
So, a few weeks after this initial spotting, this may be what I just referenced, but a second officer reported that he shot and killed the same creature, but that was identified to be a large iguana with a missing tail, I guess. So I guess iguanas get pretty big in Ohio. I don't know. But there was also a sighting in 2016, I believe, and it was off of Pokemon Go. Some kids were playing Pokemon Go, and they were walking around, and they supposedly spotted the Loveland frog. And can't remember what they did afterwards, but I think they just ran away and reported it a few weeks later.
So here's the interesting thing about cryptids in general. There's a lot of people out there that have the perspective that maybe it's spiritual, that these things are bleeding through into our spiritual world, and these are transcending kind of that interdimensional barrier to a degree. So, you look at it in that sense, and I don't see how an iguana would be bipedal, because that's what you said in the first sighting, is it was a bipedal frog, right?
Yeah, it was, I guess his second officer spotted it, like, shot and killed something, but they supposedly debunked it and said it was just a large iguana.
Yeah, so, I mean, there's that. Then the other thing you got to keep in mind, too, is that with some of these cryptid legends and everything, Trace, you're wearing glasses right now. Could you take off your glasses for me?
Okay. These are very slight prescriptions.
Oh, very slight. Okay, so this might not work then.
I can perfectly fine without them. They just help with headaches.
Well, never mind. You can put your glasses back on then. Okay, never mind. I was trying to be all cool and be like, look at me, I'm Mr. Special, but nope, ruined my moment. Thanks for that. All right. Anyway, so I used to need glasses. I had corrective eye surgery done 4 years ago. About 4 years ago. But I had pretty bad prescription. Like, I would have to be probably like 1.5 feet away from someone's face to be able to clearly see it without my glasses or contacts. Think about someone like that, like me a couple years ago, running around in the woods, and you see a deer that does some weird behavior at night in the moonlight. Wouldn't you maybe think it's Wendigo, especially?
I've heard some wild stories of some deer.
I mean, it's fair. But that's kind of my point too, is that maybe some of these creatures that are cryptids are just misattributed sightings. So that's something also to keep in mind on the more scientific perspective of it all. Be like, hey, especially in medieval times, like there was no way to correct vision. So people would say they would see something and it would just kind of be a general form maybe, and they wouldn't really exactly know what it was. They would just kind of guess. One last thing I'll interject onto the whole cryptid discussion too is it's interesting. There's not a lot of urban or city cryptids, at least that I'm aware of. Maybe you can correct me on that, but there's very few.
I think there was a supposed sighting of Mothman in Chicago in like 2018.
Okay,
but
as a general rule, no. And it's interesting. It's a little bit of an exception, I feel like, because it's a flying cryptid. But
yeah, I mean, I'm sure if you really dig into it, there's going to be some city cryptids.
I'm sure.
But for the most part, a lot of them are just like small town monsters, and then that's their whole thing.
So you got to wonder if it's that these creatures just thrive better in the wilderness and they're real, or if they're fake and just get misidentified as like tree branches and stuff, because you can see things like that, or if it's just that connection with nature and staying away from like the metals and everything, and that connection with nature we've lost that they still have, where they will kind of bleed through at times. Because you see a lot of this too in like a lot of pagan beliefs, like, and you see this C.S. Lewis kind of had a lot of pagan beliefs in the occult before he converted to Christianity and wrote like Chronicles of Narnia and everything, which everyone I'm sure is familiar with, at least from a Christian perspective, because that's like the classic, Christian fairy tale story, Chronicles of Narnia, great series. But he put a lot of the occultic ideas of like the dryad nymphs and the water spirit in Prince Caspian. A lot of that is like occult in origin and concept. But you got to wonder too, all of these beliefs of like tree spirits and water spirits and all of these things, like what validity do all of these have?
Well, I'm going back a little bit. There is a lot of these stories that are like, they're not going to show up if there's a bunch of people around.
It's true.
So like, I mean, if they are from a fourth dimension and like they can see us and interact with us, but we won't be able to know. They'll be able to see like, oh, there's a lot of people there. I don't want to.
I mean, heck, even mountain lions, dude. Have you seen like the pictures on like Facebook and Instagram and all that of a mountain lion sitting in a tree? You can hardly pick out a mountain lion, and it's just sitting there in the open, very little camouflage. It's just got that natural camouflage to it. It's really wild. And so you take that concept and you apply to something from the fourth dimension. It's like, yeah, no kidding. We probably haven't seen any of this or been able to get any video footage of it. Like that kind of checks out to a degree. But again, then that makes it harder to prove. And that's why everyone that likes science so much shies away from these ideas, because it's more fringe. And it's like, oh, you're just hallucinating. You just saw this, that. There's kind of slough it off. But what if it's not? You know, what if there's something more to all of this, that our standard model of science that already has so many holes in it is missing? And that's kind of the crux of the whole M-Quad musing. So we've been going for an hour and a half here, so this is probably our longest episode, and my video camera I'm recording with is at 10% battery. So unless you have any final thoughts to add, Trace, I am going to wrap up the show here.
Oh, I'm sure I do, but they'll come up in later episodes.
Yeah, you're not allowed, actually. Just kidding. I changed my mind. No,
okay,
no final thoughts. I'm just going to mute your mic right now. Say bye to Trace. Just kidding. I won't be that mean. All right. So, yeah, you can find us on Facebook at Musings on Mysteries and the Mythical Matrix. Just type that in. Our Instagram and TikTok handle is m.quad.musings@gmail.com. Again, that's m.quad.musings@gmail.com. If you watch the comment threads, you can watch me troll and destroy trolls and ad hominem attacks. If that's your cup of tea, then you'll enjoy it. If not, then you can just show up for some of the video content that I push out there. If you want to get a hold of us, you can email us at m.quad.musings@gmail.com. And our next episode, we will be diving into science. So we will be taking a step back from the myth of all of these cultures, and we're going to be looking at the myth of the American society, evolution. So with that, we'll wrap it up here. And I haven't found a good outro yet, dude. That's my problem, you know? Like, I feel like I should have something really good to say, but, you know. Yep, toodles. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, thank you for listening, ladies and gentlemen, mystery seekers, musers, conspiracy theorists, interdimensional philosophers from on the earth, above the earth, or below the earth, or from your missing 411 cave. So, we will end it there. Toodles.